Hey boys and girls, welcome to day 2 of our circles in the coordinate plane work. Be ready for some algebra. Calculator probably would be good. Something that I want to write down at the top of our page before we get started. So I guess hopefully you have your notes ready to go or whatever you're writing on. If you recall, our equation of a circle in the coordinate plane. I'm going to write that down. Remembering that h comma k is the center, r is the radius, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So just recall that minus thing is sometimes a little tricky, and we're going to be coming up with equations of circles today in a handful of different ways. I'm going to be asking you to try some problems and showing you how to do the others. So looking at this first one, what is the equation of the circle with center 4, 2 that passes through the point 2, -3? First things first, the nice thing, they have given us the center. So we know our h, we know our k. The thing is, though, we don't know the radius. So that is our goal right now. We got to calculate our radius, or more realistically, our r squared for our equation. So given that we know the center, let's write down what we know right now. X minus 4 squared plus y minus 2 squared is equal to whatever the radius is squared. In some of the problems, you'll be given a picture. You'll see our picture to the left. You can use these pictures to find the radius. You have a point on the circle, you know where the center is. If you can find that length, you know what the radius is. And you might already see how we could find the radius this way. If I drop this down this way and this over here, you can make a right triangle to calculate your radius, which I think is a good way to do it. But what happens if you don't have the picture? So I'm going to pretend like we don't have this to look at, even though if you know that this length is 5, this length is 2, you can do a quick Pythagorean theorem to find it. Let's figure out r the algebraic way. They give us in this problem another point. It's just some random point on the circle. What can we do with this point in this equation that we have started? I want you to think about a point as an x comma y. We can use 2 as an x coordinate and at the same time use -3 as a y coordinate. And we're going to do that because if we want to solve for r, we have to plug in something for x and plug in something for y. So I'm going to replace this x and this y, which are variables, with a specific set of numbers that is on the circle. In this case, our x is 2. Our y in this specific case is -3. And that's going to help us find r squared, which will tell us the radius, but we just really need r squared. 2 minus 4 is -2. -3 minus -2 is -5. -2 squared is 4. -5 squared is 25. 29 is equal to r squared. Which does mean that the radius is the square root of 29. It is not a nice number. But since we're only coming up with an equation as our final answer, we're actually not even going to need that square root of 29. Our final answer is going to be x minus 4 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 29, because that is our radius squared. At this point, I am going to ask you to try the second one on your own. Same way. Set up the bones of the equation first, and then solve for r in the same way. So pause and try that out. Actually, if you need help getting started, hang around for just one more second because there is something a little tricky. about this problem, a little bit different than the first one. So looking at this, the center, what's different about this one? One of our numbers is negative. And I'm hoping that when you start making your equation, that you're careful with this. It doesn't tell us our radius, so I'm going to write r squared. Our h is 7, so that's x minus 7. And then we would do, oh, I put that square in the wrong spot. I'm sorry about that. We would do y minus k, but k is negative 2. So instead of me writing minus negative 2, I would really like to write plus 2. So there's your help with your start. Use your other points to find your r squared. Come back in a moment, see the answer, see if you got it right. All right, hopefully you have gotten to a point where you found that r squared is equal to 34. Our radius would therefore be the square root of 34, which is 5 point something. I don't know, 5.8 maybe, whatever. But not needed for our equation. When we write our equation, we're going to do x minus 7 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 34. Make sure that plus is there. And make sure it's just 34 and not like 34 squared. R squared is 34 and we're replacing r squared. All right. A second way to ask these problems is to not even give you the center at all. That's not very nice of us, but it happens. We're given that 2 points on a circle make a diameter. Now I'm going to sketch this really quick, but it's simply going to be a sketch. 2, -5 would be there, -6, 7 would be there. And that's a diameter. To think about this one, if you know a diameter, you know that the diameter goes through the center. So we know that this line that I sketched goes through the center somewhere. And how are we going to find the center? Well, you got to think back to the beginning of our class. How do we find the center of a segment? We're going to find the midpoint. Reach back in your brains. Do you remember how to find the midpoint, which is going to be the center of our circle? Should have wrote of, my bad. The formula for a midpoint is the average of the x's and then the average of the y's. Add the x coordinates, divide by 2, add the y coordinates, divide by 2, and that's going to get us our midpoint, which happens to be the center for our circle. So that's going to be 2 plus -6 over 2, comma, -5 plus 7 over 2, which, if I'm not making any silly mistakes, is -4 over 2, comma, 2 over 2, which tells us that our center is -2, comma, 1. Man, I'm writing too big. I'm going to run out of space. Our center is -2, 1, which tells us our h and our k. Please notice that h is negative again. So let me start the beginning of our equation. Sorry about that. Oop, jumping around. I apologize. It's going to be x plus 2 quantity squared plus y minus 1 squared, which equals, we still don't know the radius. We could use the distance formula, but I'm guessing a lot of us don't want to use the distance formula. So I won't use the distance formula. We're going to plug in x's and y's from either of these points. Choose A, choose B, don't go between both of them, just one or the other, and we're going to plug in those values. I'm going to choose A, doesn't matter. I'm just going to choose A. So I'm going to plug in 2 for x, -5 for y. I'm going to plug in 2 for x, -5 for y, and we're going to solve for r squared. 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. -5 minus 1 is -6 squared is 36. And that's going to be our r squared. And if I am adding correctly, I get 52 is our r squared. Our radius would be the square root of 52. But that, again, as I've been saying, doesn't help us write our equation of our circle, which is going to be x plus 2 quantity squared plus y minus 1 quantity squared, which equals r squared, which we just calculated was 52. Number 4 is a little bit easier of a problem when given a diameter. I would actually like for you to read number 4 and see if you know how to do this one yourself. So pause it, try it out, come back. I'll have my answer ready to go. But this one is just a little bit easier than number 3. So I think you got it. You try it out for me. Alrighty. As you can see, I got it started. X plus 3 quantity squared, because our h is a -3, minus -3, plus y minus -1, y plus 1 squared equals. In this case, we're not given the radius, but we're given the diameter. And what do we know about the radius? It's half of the diameter. So we're going to do r squared. In this case, we're actually plugging in a number for r, not for the whole r squared thing. If our radius is 8, r squared is going to be 64. So our final answer for number 4 should look like this. All right. Hopefully you didn't think that one was too bad. We got 2 more problems, and then number 7. This one's hard. This one I'm going to get started, but I'm going to tell you, you are not responsible for doing this one. If you want a little bit of a challenge, I'll help you get started with that one, but number 7, I'm only going to start and tell you the answer. For number 5 and number 6, if you read these questions, you're going to read this word tangent. And you have to understand what the word tangent means to do these problems correctly. Now, the first thing I want to mention, it's not the trig function tangent. It's not the SOHCAHTOA thing. In this case, when we say tangent, it means touches once. We did learn that a while ago. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't. For these problems, it is really super helpful to actually do this graphically. So, oops, sorry about that. Our center is at -4, -3. Oh, I missed. There's the center of our circle. Nice of them to give us h and k because we're finding our equation. So we have x plus 4 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals. And now we need the radius. And how we are going to get the radius is use the fact that it touches the y-axis once. So from the center of a circle, when you're drawing a circle, how I've always drawn circles is I've always gone up by the radius, right by the radius, down by the radius, left by the radius, and you do your best to draw a better circle than that. But in this idea, you can count up, right, down, and left how long your radius is. And from here, to get to the y-axis, we're going to go right. And I'm going to draw a point on the y-axis because it's going to only touch it there once. And if you can figure out how far away you are, this is going to be your radius. It's going to touch this once. It's going to... I'm doing such... Oops, sorry about that. Doing such a poor job of drawing this stuff, but we're going to have this circle that touches it once. What is the radius? If you count better than me, or I guess draw better than me, the radius is 4. So we're going to plug in 4 and we're going to square it. R squared is 16. So your equation for this circle, tangent to the y-axis with a center at -4, -3, is x plus 4 quantity squared plus y plus 3 quantity squared equals 16. Now, number 6 is very similar. Please try that one on your own. Pause your video, do that one. I'm going to draw my answer, come back in a moment, and we'll get this done. All right, welcome back. Hopefully this went okay. We had our h and our k provided for us. X minus 1, we're back to our minuses. Quantity squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 9. because if you counted correctly, the radius should be 3, and r squared would therefore be 9. All right, last problem if you want to try it out. If not, I'll see you later.